Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Andrew Baird. I'm a Senior Principal Solutions Architect from Amazon Web Services. I work in our Atlanta office, and I've been with the company since 2010. So suffice to say, the type of things I'm about to talk about when I started my career as a Java software engineer at Amazon, it would just blow my mind the amount of productivity, capability, excitement. The future that everybody sees in front of us is so compelling that the notion that everything we've experimented with over the last 18 months, 24 months, really being on the precipice of this like critical mass moment we feel of everybody making it a production. The stuff I'm going to talk today about is how some of that journey has taken place and is represented in the partnership that AWS and Vercel have had over the years, and how some of the capabilities that we have that combine the strengths of both of our companies can really compel you to accelerate your AI visions and capabilities to production. So without further ado, the agenda here today. First, like I said, I'm going to give a bit of background. Then I'm going to hopefully set the stage and give you a sense of the level of capability that comes together within the story and how the integrations fit together. And then I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into a particular set of those capabilities that I think are most relevant for the audience here, hopefully. And then finally, I'm going to move into the topic of agents and how agents in particular is where a lot of the critical mass of attention has moved to today, and how to think about some of the capabilities that we've brought out to market recently and how they can play a role in the AI applications that you build. So really brief history lesson. I really want to just bring this up here to emphasize. So I began my career as a software engineer at Amazon in 2010, like I said. I became a solutions architect in 2014, started working with customers directly in Atlanta. And that first year I became a solutions architect, we released a service called Lambda. And let me tell you, as an SA who was a developer and was used to thinking about things in terms of systems and architectures, learning infrastructure was like super difficult for me. It took a lot of my time to get deep in it. And when something like Lambda came out, it was just like this huge epiphany moment where I saw the possibilities kind of became open and endless, the types of things I could create as a developer without having to have like true expertise on infrastructure. And I give you that story just because I really love the idea that Vercel as a company who is catering towards developers and front-end developers in particular, that they from the beginning have been founded and running on top of infrastructure like Lambda, because it just like imbues this authenticity and this credibility that the types of priorities they're setting as an organization and the types of problems that they want to focus on to deliver value for you as customers is totally embodied in decisions like that, and wanting to run on abstracted infrastructure like Lambda, and to offload as much operational complexity and management as possible. And I think that you as developers should take a lot of confidence in a decision like that, that the type of products that they're building, the types of experiences that they believe are going to be valuable to you as developers, is the same types of stuff that they see as valuable as a company themselves. I thought it's a really cool piece of symmetry between like how they operate as a company and what they bring to market for you as developers. So a couple other timeline points. They joined the Amazon Partner Network in 2022. It's just a signal that as our relationships grew and our customers kind of converged more and more, we're able to take advantage of opportunities where we can attest to the level of credibility and competencies they have in different areas. In 2023, they started bringing their software. It's now available on the AWS Marketplace. And then in 2024, just last year, we announced a strategic collaboration agreement together, which means there's a ton of intentional partnership conversations and strategic thinking and roadmap sharing and product alignment that we make sure that where we're headed and where Vercel is headed is going to benefit maximally for the folks like you in the room here and watching, because we want to make sure that as we're thinking about what developers want and the capabilities that are most important to them, that we make sure that the integrations our two companies are building together are gonna work well and are headed kind of in the same general direction. So, for anybody in the room that is a Vercel and AWS customer, or is a Vercel customer but not yet an AWS customer, or vice versa, if you're here learning about Vercel but your company is already a customer of AWS. I just want to point out, if you're not aware, that the types of benefits you can get from procuring your Vercel usage through the AWS marketplace. So if you as a developer have a desire to like expand and democratize the amount of usage of Vercel within your organization, and it's something that you personally use, if you're representing your company here, I imagine that you're that type of developer for your company. But you'd love to be able to see more like cohesive adoption of it at scale across your org. Being able to have it be procured through the marketplace gives a bunch of different benefits that might not be technical, but are important that you might get some technical benefits from. So examples of seeing V0 and Vercel itself available in the marketplace means if your company has an agreement with AWS, the commitments your company's made to spend levels and service usage on AWS, your Vercel usage can count towards that AWS usage. So any commitments you've made, they can contribute to the burn down of those commitments. Likewise, if your company has a particular AWS budget that is like an aggregate of all of your teams running of infrastructure on AWS, the application stacks you have here, if you procure Vercel via the marketplace, your Vercel spend is going to get folded into your AWS budget. So if you have if you have a difference in budgets available between how much you can use Vercel or how many licenses you have available versus your holistic AWS usage, there's an opportunity when you fold those two together, maybe it'll let you scale up the amount of Vercel licenses developers you can have on board of the platform. So I'm just calling that out. Getting away from kind of like the business context and the relationship we have, for folks that weren't aware, maybe you were, a lot of the choices you've made on Vercel as you build applications, under the covers, the infrastructure choices that are made and deployed are actually AWS services running under the covers that they choose. So when you're choosing, when you're building a message queue or a storage bucket, a cloud function, a lot of those underlying components are bits and pieces of AWS infrastructure and services that Vercel is running on top of. So there's this deep embedded collaboration and context that both of our organizations have been building with that customers of Vercel have been benefiting from for a long time. And it's probably never more true in how it's culminating into the world of AI. So obviously, why we're all here today is we heard you like AI, and if you're like me and you grew up in the 90s and you watched TV in the 2000s or so, you might remember a show where I can't really do a good exhibit impersonation, but when they heard that somebody liked something, you got a lot of it. So now that we know you like AI, you're going to be able to write code using AI that's going to use an AI SDK. It's going to have abstractions in front of AI capabilities that integrate with AI infrastructure and is meant to get your AI applications running at scale, AI agents and applications running at scale. So there's a moment where this feels like I'm no different than a lot of people in the room, I suspect. There's like a level of fatigue that people feel today, I imagine, and how to understand make differentiations between the choices you have available, how they integrate with each other, what benefits you're expected to get from each of them, and you see a sentence like this that kind of lays it all out in a very kind of small context. That's just a part of the story, and you can kind of feel like you're on that TV show maybe, and you've got AI kind of throughout the entire kind of mind share of how you're living your life as a developer these days. But the reality is, if you can understand how the different components are integrated with each other, the values they're supposed to bring at like individual moments of the SDLC, how to make choices that will gravitate towards your preferences from a deployment or a usability standpoint or whatever, then there's a lot of benefits to be had. And maybe the picture here, which obviously AI generated, maybe like that story is not too far off from the future where we're all going to be able to. I know another provider just launched the ability to interact with their coding capability from a mobile app. So maybe there'll be a moment where your car will be part of your SDLC process as well. So if we want to unpack like what that sentence means and how the different components, you can like point at various parts of the sentence and see the different services. You've heard a lot about today at Vercel. Being able to use capability like V0 to help you author code, full stack apps be created by the AI cloud, abstractions in the AI SDK define how that code is going to integrate with production-ready AI infrastructure, like, for example, Amazon Bedrock and Agent Core. All of those things culminate and integrate with each other in a way that it can feel it can feel like fatiguing. It can feel a little exhausting to kind of take your first steps into the ecosystem. But then once you do, and you understand that most of this story that is initially hard to reason about is all about providing abstractions. It's all about abstractions that make efficiencies go up, and value go up, and time to market get reduced, and so long as you understand how they position with each other and integrate with each other, there's the ability to have as efficient a developer experience as maybe you've ever had. All the while, those abstractions that are generated easily with AI tools are leading to some of the largest scale, most capitally invested, immense amounts of infrastructure that's production grade and ready than the world's ever experienced. And you get both of those things at the same time. It's kind of mind blowing to me that as the experience becomes easier and easier and easier, and more fluid, like the back end engineering and research and capability under the covers is growing more and more complex and sophisticated. So feel empowered that being at a conference like this, the first iteration of Ship AI, is a huge signal that you are at the very forefront, tip of the spear, riding a wave that is happening within industries right now. And the idea that the sentence put up there with all of these examples of how AI has invaded our lives as engineers, the fact that you can reason through what that means and how it makes sense should be truly empowering on how capable you are to take advantage of these things happening at once. So take comfort in that. Fight off the AI fatigue that you might feel. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper now that we've set the broad picture. I'm going to talk in particular about how Vercel and its AI SDK in particular can, one of the integration options you have as a model provider is Amazon Bedrock. I'm going to highlight the literal how that integration takes place, and then focus on a couple particular features that are Bedrock specific and how they're implemented. So the integration story is already, I think, really easy, especially if you're an AWS customer and Vercel customer. You're used to things like our identity and access management service. If you're not, stay tuned. There's some work happening that's going to make this integration story even easier. But it's as simple as going into your AWS account, setting up an OIDC, provider relationship between your Vercel Team Slug and that AWS account. Once you've set up that OIDC relationship, you can create an AWS IAM role. Within that IAM role, you set some parameters within the trust relationship that defines which Vercel team is able to assume the role that you've just created. And then while you're working in a project in Vercel, it's as simple as updating the environment variables to be configured to use the particular region you're interested in on AWS and the IAM role that you just created. So then as you're interacting with either AWS's SDKs or Vercel's SDKs that integrate with various AWS backend services, all of the identity and credential capabilities are totally abstracted from anything you have to worry about. So you go through those simple steps, and then as you're writing code or your AI assistants are writing code, the authenticated relationship between Vercel, that project, and your AWS account are pre-built. Okay, so say you've done that and you want to get integrated with our model hosting service, Bedrock. So using the AI SDK, Bedrock is one of the available providers you have to choose. It's as simple as importing Bedrock as a particular model provider, interacting with one of the AI SDK core functions like generate text, listing the model you'd like to have invoked, and providing a prompt. And it's as simple as that. You've done all the work to integrate AWS to Vercel. You interact with the AI SDK, and these are the level of abstractions I was referring to earlier, where if you look at this very tiny amount of code, besides the imports and the parameters of model selection, there's literally one line of code that's meaningful here, where you're going to define your prompt and whatever you'd like to have integrated, and the amount of engineering achievement represented by these 7 lines of code is mind-blowing to me. And that's how easy it is, and that's the power of abstractions and having libraries like this at your fingertips. So it's as easy as that for organizations who aren't aware, if you have not adopted Bedrock. One of the reasons why this can be so powerful from a front-end engineering perspective to have it be this simple is that a lot of our enterprise customers that adopt Bedrock, the things they like about it are the amount of of like governance controls, the variety of models that are available, the unification of like API capabilities and observability and cost and billing and the security story of Bedrock. So you get all of those like enterprise grade benefits that'll help you push for AI adoption, and pushing it towards production as you have those conversations with the relevant teams in your company, like compliance and legal and security, et cetera. So you get the benefit from like all of the Bedrock-oriented value propositions that AWS brings to the table, while your front-end developer experience is this like very neat abstracted SDK that Vercel provides to you. So you get the best of both sides. So a couple more, in particular, Bedrock capabilities that I'll highlight. Guardrails, in particular, is we think a true differentiator inside of AWS. So when interacting with an LLM, if you've got a use case where you're concerned about hallucinations, you're like everybody probably is, you should be concerned about hallucinations. They're a real thing you have to deal with. If you're concerned about the user interactions having to like filter out harmful or suggestive content, if you've got a regulated use case where you need to make sure that the responses generated are adhering to some policies that are relevant to that compliance, guardrails are something that you can build inside of the Bedrock service through our own APIs or a console, where you either configure what your preferences are along a lot of pre-baked kind of filtering guidelines like harmful content and suggestive content. But really differentiated is we have a group inside of AWS called the Automated Reasoning Group. And it's a group of research scientists who, even before LLMs were around, were building mathematical ways to prove the technical truth of something. And so they were applying this to things like provable security, provable network integration. And then when LLMs came around, they saw that LLMs are really, really good at asserting the relationship between like two technical pieces of logic or context. So the idea that you can build a reasoning guardrail based on some text you might already have written, like a handbook for a particular type of employee that you'd like to build an AI agent for, or a policy that adheres that defines how a certain employee has to adhere to a certain regulation or something like that. You can have that document be ingested into the Bedrock service. We will automatically generate a guardrail that evaluates text responses against the policy document that you've provided to us as a guardrail. And then once you've done that and all of that, that like infrastructure side guardrail creation is done for you, you're able to interact with it really, really easily and neatly from inside the AI SDK. So as you are using using Amazon Bedrock as a model provider, one of the provider level attributes you can select is the ability to have a particular guardrail you've pre-created inside of the Bedrock service and have it be applied to any generations that happen. Technical thing I haven't mentioned yet is that one of the reasons the guardrails are so powerful inside of Bedrock is they happen in line within the request and response flow. So like as you invoke Bedrock as a service and the underlying models you choose generate a response, rather than have that response be generated and then subsequently, sometimes asynchronously on other providers, be evaluated against like the filtering logic you'd like applied to that response, inside a Bedrock guardrail, it is evaluated against the Bedrock guardrail even before it's returned as a response. So there's no additional kind of threat vectors you need to worry about where there's a moment of generation where it contains some content that doesn't meet your satisfaction before filter rules have been applied against it. This is something that happens in line. So if you have a use case where like responsible AI, regulations are applied, there's real like user safety, health and safety concerns you've got. Brand, sensitivity. Guardrails could be a differentiated way you might be able to unlock those use cases at your company. Next is citations. So citations, again, I'll go through these ones. These ones I think are a little more self-explanatory, but if you're using a particular knowledge base associated with a prompt, whether it's a file you've uploaded or like a more formal knowledge base inside of our Bedrock service, having the model cite where its response was generated from. It's another couple lines of code to say that you want citations to be provided as part of response. So if you are building agents where user trust in the response is a huge factor in the usability of that particular like agentic use case you have. Providing citations to users is a huge value-added thing. Prompt caching. Prompt caching is, again, another like couple lines of code. The amount of abstraction that Vercel's built into their SDK is amazing. I love it. So prompt caching, the ability for you to define like the amount of prompt context that's going to be the same from user to user, the amount of tokens people have realized, like as their prompts have grown and as their scale grows, the amount of input token cost against LLMs and hosting services that goes towards a lot of that like repeated prompt context or instruction prompts that you provided to the models. You can define cache points really easily and say these are the this is the amount of context that is going to be considered cacheable, and the amount of like performance gain and cost gain can be pretty dramatic, because typically those prompts have grown pretty large over time, and the user prompts and questions are often very short. So if you're not taking advantage of prompt caching, it's definitely highly recommend you take a look at that, and it's very easy to implement. And then reasoning. So if you're using a reasoning model, and you want to be able to have an experience where you're budgeting the exact amount of thinking that a model is going to do, you have a really quick way within Bedrock through the AI SDK to define how many tokens you want to grant to the model within a particular inference, how much reasoning, how many tokens they're able to spend on reasoning. And another pro tip here, beyond like just having reasoning tokens be part of any prompting, if you have use cases where like they're benefiting from thinking and reasoning, try to build a multi-turn interaction where you're asking the model to think for itself. So the prompting you do is not just expecting it to think, but you're directing it to think about particular things you think are important to a problem. You might be surprised at the amount of performance benefits you get. So that's Bedrock. That's the AI SDK. Now I want to talk about agents. So this conference was especially well timed with an announcement we made just about 10 days ago or so. Our Agent Core service just went generally available. It is certainly the only newsworthy thing that has happened in relationship to AWS for the last 10 days. So great timing. But if you haven't played with or you're not aware of what Agent Core is AWS's compute service, and there's a slew of other capabilities I'll mention in a second, where if you have experienced kind of the chasm between building agents and developing them initially and seeing like on your developer workstation or in a development environment at low scale, you can kind of prove magic really quickly, and the use case seems really compelling. But answering all of the production-related questions of agents in order to have deployment happen and have the use case be successful, there's a big chasm there. The amount of like operational requirements, cost, scalability, performance, all of those things. So Agent Core is meant to be AWS's answer to provide a managed compute service that gives you all of the expected benefits you'd find from an AWS managed service, but in the context of running agents. So quick architecture diagram of what. So the Agent Core today is about 6 different capabilities kind of rolled under one service brand name, Agent Core. And this is an example of what the Agent Core runtime service looks like. Maybe the core capability you can think about when it comes to Agent Core. So as you're building agents, whether you're using our SDKs or other SDKs to build your agents, if you're using the AI SDK to integrate with models directly, but you're packaging your software through that AI SDK in a Docker container, and that's how you run your AI applications. All Agent Core really is you bring any model, you bring any framework, you bring your agent software code that's been written and packaged in a Docker container. There's an invocation endpoint within that Docker container that exposes how your agent is invoked. And we take that Docker container and we run it and we scale it and we manage all of the security around it. We manage all the sessions between users to those agent container runtimes. And you don't have to worry about any of that. And I think what we've heard from a lot of customers is that when you want to run at scale, there's very different, like there's container platforms already today that a lot of companies are running their agent software with. They can run it on ECS, they can run it on Kubernetes, on AWS. There's other kind of container management services available on other providers. There are a lot of differences for what agents require when it comes to like appropriately managing the sessions, the security segmentation. Agents are very unpredictable in the amount of resources they use with how users are going to interact with them. The business metrics that those agents might be tied to are pretty hard to scale against. Having an autonomous piece of software that's running inside your environment as an agent makes things like namespaces and like the infrastructure co-location of other bits of capability within the container environment, like truly kind of mission critical bits of things to get right. And the idea that you can have all of those benefits directly managed for you by AWS lets you spend a lot more time building the agent software applications and the things that differentiate you without having to worry about all the infrastructure management. So this is Agent Core Runtime. I also called out here on the right, once that container is up and running, if you want to use it as a place where you're hosting your MCP servers, if you've got remote MCP servers and you've got your agents running elsewhere, it's also a service that lends itself well to building remote MCP servers that can be invoked as part of the service too. But it's not just a place where you run agent containers themselves, where the agent software is. One of the really neat parts that we're emphasizing with Agent Core is the ability for you to use whatever pieces of the Agent Core story that matter to you in your application. So this is the Agent Core identity. So if you have, if you've tried to build a sensitive use case where sensitive data and workers' access to that data, which are some of the most valuable use cases for agents, getting identity right is very hard. It's a pretty hard architecture, super sensitive. Building the integrations between identity providers on the inbound side, so whoever your like employee authentication or user authentication and identity services on the inbound side, the service stack that the tools represent that those agents are interacting with. How do you think about what the identity of the agent itself is? How do you think about the access that agent should have for autonomous work it's doing on its own behalf versus autonomous work it's doing on behalf of another end user that does have access to those systems? How do you store those credentials effectively so that they have an appropriate relationship to the user sessions over time, managing like the rotation and integration of all of those identity credentials with the downstream services. So Agent Core Identity is a managed identity architecture and set of APIs that do that for you, that let you bring any OIDC, including popular providers like Microsoft Entra ID, Amazon Cognito, and Auth0. You can have all of those form your inbound identity, and then any OAuth compatible downstream identity source that your agents are going to interact with from a tools perspective. This service and architecture will manage all of that for you. Next is memory. So I think almost everybody's recognized the especially from a consumer perspective, the amount of value that gets driven from having your agents kind of retain contextual memory with your users over time. So being able to have, similar to identity, this is like a managed architecture where the data infrastructure and the data architecture and the APIs for it are built for you by Bedrock Agent Core Memory. And you'll get the benefits of having kind of a predefined set of namespaces for short-term memory and long-term memory, how the syncing and rotation of data between those two data stores is happening for you, being able to define your own custom namespaces within the memory ecosystem so that as your agents are dealing with things like chat histories, wanting to summarize past chats or reference things in past conversations, or retain certain elements of like user style preferences or chat preferences, all of those things can live inside Agent Core Memory, and we will manage it for you. And provide you with an SDK that makes integrating with whichever your agent front end software SDK of choices makes the whole story easy. So I'll just wrap up by saying, if you haven't played with the integration between our two companies before, just know that we are strategically collaborating and see so much alignment between our two companies that we really encourage you to build that relationship technically between your use of Vercel and with AWS. Try to build a new front end with V0, thinking about how the AI SDK is going to integrate with services like Bedrock, and then try and build your first agent with Agent Core and see how easy it is to kind of tie the whole story together and feel like empowered by the amount of AI capability that people have brought to bear rather than fatigued by it. So Hopefully you learned a couple new tidbits. I appreciate the time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks everybody.